Hi, this is Kevin. Welcome to the part of the tutorial where we're going to add attributes and then later select unique identifiers. Okay, so how do we decide what attributes we need? Well, I typically want to go back to whatever planning process I've done, and I probably have a list of attributes hanging around. And in this case, because we did a ragbag exercise, I do have a list of these attributes. So let's see what I have. Class meeting password, username, email address, student name, instructor name, course offering name. Okay, course offering has turned into course section. Semester name, class meeting date, course offering location, course offering time. Okay, let's um, let's look at those. So what I typically do is, in terms of the attributes, I'll do the easy ones up first. Okay, and the easy ones for me is I typically, my style of designing is that each entity gets a simple identifier. So course gets a course ID, class meeting gets a class meeting ID. Um, this is a popular practice for people who are implementing these models with relational databases. And most of my students are kind of headed that way. So I'm just going to go ahead and give everything a simple identifier. So to do this, we're going to go up to course. That's where we're going to begin. And let's make these just, well, we don't have to make them any bigger than they are. All right, so double click on field. Okay, double click on field. Sometimes it's hard to get these to highlight, and it gives me a light blue highlight. And this is where I'm going to put in course ID. Okay, I'm not going to do anything with the key a column yet. Uh, Later on, yeah, that's where we're going to identify the attributes that are the unique identifiers for the entity. Let's go over to semester and get a semester ID, and down to user and get a user ID, and instructor will get an instructor ID, and course section. I'm going to give it its own simple identifier. So course section, not with two C's, just with one. Course section ID. And that's it's already too long to fit in the box. So if we go up to the right, upper right part of the box, we get a stretching arrow, and we can just stretch it over. Okay, eventually we'll be stretching all of these. And I've got two or three more. Student ID, and down to user story, there'll be a user story ID, and that's going to take a little bit of stretching too, and class meeting ID. And we're going to stretch that box as well. Okay, and click out of there. Okay, so we're started with all of them. So I just want to point out a couple of basic facts about the diagrammer and putting on attributes. Okay, how many attributes you have for each of the entities is controllable by selecting the entity box and then there's a drop down here for fields. Okay, so it's currently set to 3, so we have lines for 3 attributes. But if we went down to 2, it would make it a shorter box. If we went up to 6, it would make it a longer box. Okay. Eventually, when we start to do with this key column, we're going to put, when we pick unique identifiers, we're going to put an ID for the attributes that are part of the unique identifier, and then we're just going to get rid of the word key and all the other entries. Okay, so those are the mechanics. My experience is the shorter the box, the harder I find it to be able to double click on a field and get it to highlight. So there are times when I'm double clicking like crazy and I can't get it to highlight. Sometimes if I make the box a little bigger, it seems the user interface is a little more likely to respond. Perhaps I'm imagining that. I don't know. Okay, so let's look at this. So a couple of things that I have username and email address. Okay, I'm thinking that we might want to have the email address. This is going to be at a university. Okay, and so everybody associated with it's probably going to have a university email address. And I guess they all should be different. So I'm going to use, instead of a username, I'm just going to have email address. The email address is going to be the same as the username. So we have user ID. We're going to double click on field and put email address. And again, here's where we're going to have to start getting artful because these things are all on top of each other. Okay. So again, I'm going through my checklist. So I didn't do anything with class meeting password yet. Okay. Let's do something with that. So let's go down to class meeting. And the idea I have here is that how do I know you're really in the classroom? Well, I've written the password on the board. So let's just add class meeting password here. There are other ways to do this, but this is my least technological version of it. Okay. Okay, so I've got that. What else have I got? I see that I've got student name and instructor name. Okay, let's do that. So do we really want a single field? Well, I think we've probably learned about relational databases, certainly, that with respect to names and addresses and things like that, we want to design them in a disaggregated way. And I think it's okay to do that when you're in the conceptual data model phase. So let's, we're going to have instructor ID. Let's just give them a first name and a last name. Okay, so there's going to be a first name. There's going to be a last name. All right. All right, and then let's come down to student. Let's do the same thing. First name, and let's give them a last name. Okay, and again, with the names of the attributes, I am using lowercase with underscores in between words. That's become a pretty good standard for modern data modelers and database designers. And some of these diagramming tools you can actually forward engineer the diagram into a database schema. And so we want to pick a standard like this. Um, this is a format for names that we're calling snake case. Why don't we just put them into the diagram in case we have a diagrammer that later we're able to generate some code from it. Okay, so that's how we're doing those. What else have I got left here? Student name, instructor name, course offering name. Okay, so let's think about this. What's going to be a course offering name? I'm decided because I have a course and I have a semester, okay, and instead of course offering, I'm calling this course section. Here's my thought for how this might work. We have a course ID, okay. Let's say that every course has a name as well, course name. Okay, and that's going to take a little bit of stretching here too. And let's say that we have a semester ID. Okay, that sounds good. Are we going to have a semester name? Well, let's think about that. For right now, let's just say that we're going to have an attribute called semester name. I'm going to talk you out of it in a minute, but well, I may and I may not talk you out of it. I'm thinking of talking you out of it at this very second. So we have a course name and a semester name, but we need some kind of a section code as well. Okay, and we could call that section name, section code. Today, I'm feeling that should be section code. Okay. One of the universities where I've taught, there are always numbers. At the University of Illinois, at the iSchool, sections have letter codes like AO2, AO4, AOG, AOU. Okay, so we'll say section code. All right, so that's good. All right, we're going to leave that as a semester name for right now. And look back on our thing here. So we've got semester name, class meeting date. Class meeting date. Okay, so we have a class meeting ID, a class meeting password. Let's have a class meeting date. Okay. Okay. Now, I have a couple of other things having to do with the class meeting. I'm thinking it said course offering location, course offering time. Do I really need these? No, I'm thinking that even though way back when I did the ragbag, I was thinking that wouldn't it be nice to have the date and the location of the class? Classes meet on a certain date. They typically don't meet more than one time. We probably have the location and the time in some other system. Why do we want to really duplicate that? So let's get rid of that. So for the attributes that I got out of my brainstorming ragbag session, I've used them up already. Okay, so let's kind of work our way through. Class meeting. It has an ID. It has a password. It has a date. So that's every time the class meets for a section. We're going to have an instance of class meeting. Okay. So that looks like I'm doing pretty well on attributes. Let's look at student. They have a student ID number. Perhaps we need perhaps we need to um, perhaps we need to coordinate a data with some kind of information system at the university, and they have a university ID number. Let's add that. Okay, so let's say that instead of 3 here, we're going to have 4. Okay, and let's get it to highlight and say university ID number. Okay, all right, and we need to stretch that a little bit. Okay, that's not doing too badly. All right, so we're okay for class meeting, we're okay for student. User story. Okay, now we're using user story here as a sort of a metric for functionality. These are things that you can do in the system. So we have an ID. It has to have a name. This is the name of something that users can do in the system. So let's just call it user story name. Okay. And I think we've got that. And this is just really a lookup table kind of entity. So I've got 2 attributes. I think that's all we're going to have. So I'm just going to highlight this and go up and say I'm only going to have 2. And it's going to shorten up that box for me. Okay. Let's go up and look at user. Okay. So we've got user, we have a user ID, we have an email address. Do we need to say what type of user this is? Well, if it's an instructor, we can tell by seeing that we have a relationship to instructor, so we don't have to say that. If it's a student user, we know it's the student. If it's some other kind of user like a system admin, we can probably just tell by the permissions that they have. So for right now, I don't want to put any other attributes on here. Let's shorten this one down to 2. Okay. So let's look at instructors. They have an instructor ID, a first name, a last name. They probably have a university ID number too. Okay, so let's make that box larger, highlight that, and say we want one more attribute, university ID number. Okay, and then we're going to stretch that box out a bit. Okay, that looks good. It's we have to move things around. Well, you know, before we're done, we'll get these things to look a little prettier. Okay, so that looks good for the instructor. Okay, let's look over here. Course section. It has the course section ID, a section code. And now I want to point out something really important about this data modeling. And when you go to pick, when you go to say what attributes you have, there are 2 ways to record a fact in the database. One is to add an attribute, okay? The other is to have a relationship, right? So when we want to know about this course section, what course is it for? Do we need to add an attribute for it? No, we don't, because we can chase over the relationship here and find out the course ID and the course name. Okay, so we don't need an attribute for that because we have a relationship for that. Likewise, what semester is it for? Does that need an attribute? No, because we have a relationship for that. Okay. Now, the good thing about these relationships is that not only do they provide uh, values, but they control values as well. Because you can only add semesters that are instances of the semester entity. You can only add courses that are instances of the course entity. So they provide opportunities to record the value and a mechanism to control the values. So I'm thinking that course section ID and section code are enough. Okay, so let's stop here. Okay, let's highlight this and say we've only got two attributes. Okay. All right, so let's go up to course. Okay. And we've got course ID and course name. And that's not too surprising because we're kind of using this entity as a sort of a lookup entity, a lookup table. Okay. For right now, I can't think of anything else about course. There are probably other things of interest, like does it have a course number? Sure, it probably does. So let's do that. Now, in some with diagramming products, you could take a row and you could drag it. Oh, I was able to drag that. It's the first time I was able to do that. So I dragged the name down here. That's pretty cool. I wonder if I can drag it from entity to, no, I don't seem to be able to do that. Okay, let's do that. I highlight it. Well, I don't even know how I did it. Okay, well, I dragged it. You're going to explore and you're going to tell me in class how you do your dragging. Okay, so course ID, let's say course number. Course number. Okay, that's good. Course name. That's all I think we have. So instead of 6, this should be 4 long. This should be 3 long. So let's take 3 out of this. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right. Now I'm going to tell you that I'm happy with everything but semester at this point. Okay, so I'm not completely happy with the way the lines are going over here, so let's pull them away from each other. Now my problem is my isStudentUser has gone up to the top and I'm crossing lines, so I don't want that. Okay, so that's okay. Let me pull this over a little bit. Okay, let's move everything out to the right just a little bit. Okay, and there's a real, kind of art to this. Ideally, you don't want the lines to kink if they don't have to, but yeah, those are all looking pretty well and pretty easy to read, except that we've got lines that cross here. So let's take this isStudentUser relationship, okay, and delete it. Okay, and I do that. I have a keyboard here, external keyboard from my Mac, so I'm using the delete key, which is more of a Windows key. So that's how I'm doing it on my keyboard. And let's draw this again. So we're going to draw this from student to user. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, and we're going to say is student user. Okay, and we're going to get off of that. And I guess our student could maybe come over here. Huh? It's not looking so bad. Okay, and let's look at the cardinality. On that one side, it should be 0 to 1. So let's change this to 0 to 1. Okay, and on this many side, it should be 0 to many. And now that's been fixed. Okay, and again, this thing auto saves, but I would like to save this. So file, save. Okay, to make sure that that's been saved in the Lucidchart world. Okay, now let's come back to semester. And let's think about this issue of semester name. So what am I thinking about a semester name? Well, the current semester is fall 2021. Okay. The prior one was summer 2021. The next one is going to be spring 2022. Okay. Well, I could uh, I could allow the users of the system to simply have a strategy for creating the names of these semesters, but there's nothing to really keep them from sticking to that scheme, right? There's no way to control the values. They could decide that a semester name is Hi Mom, and there's not much we could do about it. Okay, so what if we want to control the components of the semester name? Well, then I think that we ought to put the component parts into the data model. Okay, how are we going to do this? Well, we're not going to have a semester name, so let's get rid of that. Okay, uh, we're going to use the combination of the year and the kind of period, uh, fall, spring, summer, etc., as the combination of those to identify the semester. So, okay. So do we have any other fields for semester? I don't think we do. I think we just have the ID. So let's go up and say that that has just one attribute now. It's ID. And let's say that there are two other entities. One is going to be year, and the other one is going to be period. We'll call it period. I've called it that in other systems, and I think it seems to work. So let's pull out another entity. Okay, and we want to give that a shaded header. Okay, and what's the name? Well, it's going to be year. Okay, we might want to call it something like academic year. No, that has a different meaning altogether. So let's just say that we're going to have year. Okay, and it's going to have a year ID. Okay, and it's going to have a year value like 2021. Okay, and it's just going to have the two of those. It's just going to be a lookup table. Okay, so let's say that it's only got two attributes. And let's come over here and have another one for what are we going to call it? Let's just call it period. I've called it that before. I think I mentioned maybe not the best of names, but I'm thinking summer, spring, fall. Okay, uh, those are all seasons, but some institutions have like, uh, quarters, and some of them have, you know, winterim. We have all these kinds of things. So let's just say that this is going to have, again, it's going to have a period ID, and it's going to have a period name. Okay. And it's just going to have those two attributes. So let's say it's only going to have two. Okay. So we need to draw the lines, and in each case, you're going to say the many sides, the one side's going to be on the semester side. Okay. No, let's just think about this. For each semester, it's for one and only 1 year. One and only 1 year. Okay. So, let's draw this like this. Okay. And move that up. So let's say it's a dashed line. All right. And what's it going to be called? Well, let's say it's called has year. Okay. And let's do it the other way. Let's say from here, let's draw from the periods over to the semesters. And let's call that move this guy over a bit. Okay, let's draw this again. Okay, so we'll put this down here, and we'll draw from the period to the semester, and we're going to call that has semester. Okay, and what else are we going to say about it? Well, it's going to have a dashed line. I wish I could get the default to change to dash. You students are going to show me how to do that, I think, one of these days. And let's just look at the cardinalities. They're not right on these two. So has semester, for each semester, one and only one period. Okay. So let's highlight that. One and only one period. Okay. And for each period, 0 to many semesters, because we may not have set up any semesters for that period yet. And let's do the same thing here for the years. So one and only one at one end, and 0 to many at the other end. Okay? And maybe we can pull year back a little further so you can read that a little better. Okay? All right, now, would every conceptual data modeler have decided to represent these two entities, year and period, instead of just having a semester name? No, I think they wouldn't. You'd find some who would just give it a semester name, and maybe they would worry about controlling values when they got farther down the line of database design in logical database design. In my classes, I really want to focus on controlling values as an important thing that the data model does for the users. Okay, and I think it's a requirement. Okay, so I think that in our classes, our point of view should be that when it's appropriate to control values, we're going to show that being done by the entities and the relationships that we have in the conceptual data model. Even though maybe other practitioners who who weren't taking classes in the School of Information wouldn't be so focused on controlling values so early in the process. Our kind of pedigree as information science folks, I think, compels us to be thinking about controlling values this early in the process. Okay, so let's say that we want to zoom to content so we can see the whole thing, and that's pretty much it. Okay. I kind of like what we have here. Okay, as I go through and I look at the attributes that we have, the combination of the attributes and the relationships really tells the story. And I want to emphasize again, okay, attributes and relationships are two alternative ways to express facts in the data model. They're all first-class facts. Okay. When would you use an attribute? Well, you would use an attribute when you don't, you're not really thinking about controlling values. Things like names of things. Okay. When are you going to use a relationship? More typically when you want to control the values. Okay. That's how we want to do that. All right, so are we done with this part of the tutorial yet? Well, we're done with the adding attributes. Now it's time to show what our unique identifiers are. So we have to pick one or more attributes for each entity to be the unique identifier for that entity. Okay, so let's just go through. Let's look at course. Okay, course ID is going to be fine. Okay, okay, so course ID is going to uniquely identify it. Course number and course name might eventually, when we get farther along in the data design process, we may want to say that those have to be unique values. Okay. Right now in conceptual data modeling, I think we just want to say that there is there's an attribute that's going to uniquely identify the course, and that's going to be course ID. Okay, so these other ones we're going to highlight and delete in order to get rid of the values. Okay. Now, some other practitioners, as an alternative to having this ID column, would just have the one column for the attributes, and they would be marking the IDs in bold and underline. That isn't any easier to do from a practical basis, and having this additional column is going to help us when we get a little further down the road and we'd like to convert this conceptual data model ERD to a logical database design ERD. We're going to be glad that we have the extra column. Okay, so that one's done. Let's look at year. Well, year ID. Okay, so let's say that year ID is our ID. Okay, year value is not a part of the unique identifiers. Again, the year value probably when we turn this into a relational database, your value is going to have a unique constraint on it, but unique constraints don't appear in conceptual data models. Semester, well, that needs an ID. Let's make that ID. And you can kind of see here, I'm clicking on this and it's just not cooperating. So here's what I've had some success with. Give it a lot more columns. Okay, and then sometimes I can come back here and have more luck. This is worth your life to do it. Diagrammers always have this problem. The other thing I've sometimes done is let's reduce the zoom, no, increase the zoom side. Okay, let's see if we increase it, if we can do a little bit better. Semester, yeah, there we go. So make this one ID, okay, and then come up here and say we're only going to have one attribute. So maybe changing the zoom is probably the best way to get that done. Okay. And we can say zoom to content again. Okay, so we've got those three done. Let's do the same for a period. Make that ID. Make the other one blank. And course section. So we have a course section ID. Okay, so we're going to make that ID. We're going to make this section code blank. And again, the section code, the combination of course section and section code should probably get a unique attribute. And again, I'm not getting that. So now we're going to make this a little bigger, and then maybe I can get that to work. Okay. All right. Instructor, again, the ID is instructor ID, and these other three are just going to be blank. So in the style that I'm teaching you for these IDs, we're just assuming that each entity has its own simple ID. So at least in the implementation of these models with relational databases, it's the style of the day to have every table has a simple integer key, and that's pretty much we've taken that practice and kind of moved it back into conceptual data modeling. Is there, would there be some hardcore conceptual data modelers who think that that's kind of a rough thing to do? Well, they might, but I think this is going to serve us pretty well. And then class meeting is going to have an ID. Give it an ID, just one. Now this one wants to balk at being. Why this happens, I don't quite understand. But the bigger you make them, it seems like the easier they are to do. Okay, a couple more. User story gets an ID on the ID. The other one's not a key. And then user, same thing. ID and the email address is going to serve as the user name. Okay, there's maybe some question about whether you need a further username here, because we've got names and instructor and student, and I'm just going to say that I'm not sure. It's always a problem to add things that would be redundant. Our system admin in this way wouldn't have a name. Okay, is that the end of the world? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say I'm not too worried about that for right now. Okay, is that a perfect set of affairs? Well, no. All right, so let's go down to this zoom and pick zoom to content, and we see it all here. And I'm thinking this is looking pretty good. Okay, so we have, oh, I see we got some kind of extra relationship over here. So why don't we highlight that and delete that? Okay, that's not something we wanted. From time to time, when you're trying to do something, you'll accidentally create a relationship you weren't intending to. Okay, so I'm just going to go back up and do file save. Okay, and I've got one more part to the tutorial where we're going to review this and talk about is it sufficient or do we want to change it. So I'm going to finish up here, and I invite you to come to the next of these tutorial videos and talk about are we done yet? Okay, and with that, I'm going to say bye.